Hello friends, welcome back to another video on DINAS Academy, and this video is all about relative pronouns. It is one of the most important and most confused pronoun, and there is no doubt definitely there will be a question related to relative pronoun both in your school exams as well as the competitive exams. And trust me guys, after watching this video the concept will be crystal clear about the usage of relative pronouns. So without any further delay, let's get into the topic. Okay, guys, so let's know what is a relative pronoun. A relative pronoun is a pronoun that is used to introduce a relative clause. The main English relative pronouns are which, that, who, and whom. Other than this, there are other relative pronouns also, but these four are the most often used relative pronouns. These words can also function as other parts of speech. They aren't exclusively used as relative pronouns. So, guys, we got to know that a relative pronoun is a pronoun that is used to introduce a relative clause. So, it's very important to know what is a relative clause before understanding the relative pronoun. A relative clause is a phrase that adds information to a sentence. All relative clauses describes a noun and they begin with one of these relative pronouns or relative adverbs. For example, the woman who works in the bank is my neighbor. The second one, my cousins, one of whom is a doctor, live in England. Here, when you look at both the examples, we can notice that a relative clause is giving an additional information, and the relative clause is making use of the relative pronoun, that is who and whom. An important note, guys, the relative clause comes after a noun or noun phrase and gives some additional information about a thing or a person in question. Okay, hope the meaning of the relative pronoun and relative clause is clear to you guys. So let's understand the four important relative pronouns in detail. That is which, that, who, and whom. And let's start with which. The pronoun relative pronoun which is used always to refer to things or used in non-restrictive clauses. For example, my bike, which I have owned for 3 years, is in need of some maintenance. The second one, that is that. The second relative pronoun is that. It is used to refer to things, but it is used in restrictive clauses. An important note, guys, the pronoun relative pronoun which is used in non-restrictive clauses, whereas that is used only in restrictive clauses. For example, the last bike that I owned wasn't very resilient. Let's see the third type of relative pronoun which is commonly used is who. Who is always used to refer to the people and it is used as a subject pronoun. For example, the man who lives next door to me is called Ram. And the fourth most common used relative pronoun is whom. Whom is also used to refer to the people, but it is used as an object pronoun. For example, I do not know the names of my other neighbors whom I never met. So, guys, when we look at both the relative pronouns, that is who and whom, both are used to refer to the people, but the pronoun who is used to refer to the subject pronoun, whereas whom is used to refer to an object pronoun. So, overall, the four important relative pronouns are which, that, who, and whom. And which and that are used for referring to the things, and who and whom are used to refer to the people. And which is used in non restrictive clauses, that is used in restrictive clauses, and whereas who is used in subject pronoun and whom is used with the objective pronoun. So, guys, these relative pronouns are very important, but other than this, there are three relative adverbs also, like where, when, and why. Let's understand their usage by comparing each one of them with another. First, let's know the usage of who versus that. Who is a relative pronoun which is used only to refer the people, but sometimes animals. It's never used with the things. I repeat, who relative pronoun is never used with things. And let's see that is little trickier subject because it is primarily used for the things other than the people, but it's often used to refer to the people too also, especially when making a generalization. For example, parents that engage with their kids. As we have already discussed, that the relative pronoun that is primarily used for things other than people, but it is used with the people in two occasions. That is, first one, as we already discussed with the example, while making the generalization, and the second one when you're talking about specific people. For example, it was Mr. Ramesh that said it. Alright, let's understand the other relative pronoun, that is what. What can be used as a relative pronoun, but it works slightly differently. It does not follow on form a preceding noun phrase, but it introduces a clause on its own. This is called a free relative clause. Let's understand this with the example. The thing what she has accomplished is extraordinary. What she has accomplished is extraordinary. When we look at both the examples closely, we notice that the first sentence is incorrect and the second one is correct because, as the rule goes, the relative pronoun what introduces a clause of its own, and hence the second example is correct one, because you can notice that in the second example the clause has begun with the relative pronoun, that is what she has accomplished is extraordinary. Okay, guys. The another interesting thing about relative pronoun is the relative pronouns like which, who, whom, what can also be combined with using ever to create the compound relative pronouns. So when we combine the relative pronoun which with ever, it becomes the relative or compound pronoun, that is whichever. These pronouns are used to indicate that you do not know the specific identity of the thing or person you are referring to and are making a general statement, like what they are used in free relative clauses. So, which is a relative pronoun and whichever is a compound relative pronoun, and similarly, who is a relative pronoun, whoever is a compound relative pronoun, and accordingly, we can make them as compound relative pronoun. Let's understand them with the example. The examples for compound relative pronouns are whoever gets rid of all their cards first is the winner. The second example, people do whatever you can to help. Alright, hope the concept is clear to you. Let's move to the another interesting relative pronoun, that is whose. The possessive pronoun form of who is whose. Whose can also be used as a relative pronoun to indicate ownership, but it's rarely and usually reads unnaturally. It's used as a relative determiner, that is, to modifying a noun that comes after it, is much more standard. Let's understand this with the example. The man whose it was asked me to give it back. And second one, the man whose had it was asked me to give it back. Here, when you look at both the examples closely, the second example is the right one because it reads very naturally as it is used as a relative determiner rather than the relative pronoun. Okay, let's move to the next one, that is when and where. Some grammarians classify when and where as relative pronouns, but in certain contexts, these words are usually regarded as relative adverbs instead of relative pronouns because their usage of then and there. Here, then the form of when and there the form of where, and then and there are naturally the adverbs. Okay, guys, let's move to the other one, that is leaving out the relative pronouns. In many cases, the relative pronoun can be left out of the sentence without affecting its meaning. The relative pronoun can be left out if both of the following conditions apply. The first condition is the relative clause it introduces is restrictive, that is, not surrounded by commas. The second condition, if it functions as object, not the subject of the clause. So let's understand this with the examples. First, let's understand the examples where the relative pronouns are optional. The first example, please, it's the least that I can do. When you look at this example closely, we can make the sentence complete, meaningful without using the relative pronoun that. So, that is an optional. Please, it's the least I can do. The second example, the second person whom I met at the office was Sandra. Here, the optional pronoun is whom. Without whom also we can make the sentence complete and meaningful. The third example, it was the biggest cathedral that I had ever seen. Here you can use the sentence without using the relative pronoun that, like it was the biggest cathedral I had ever seen. So here in all these three examples, that, whom and that are the relative pronouns which can be used optional. And the examples for mandatory relative pronouns are there are many species of birds that migrate every year. Here, the usage of the relative pronoun that is mandatory because without the usage of that, we cannot make the sentence complete or meaningful. Let's move to the second example. You are not the first person who has pointed that out to me. Here also, the relative pronoun who is mandatory. And let's see the last example. My wallpaper, which is blue, is starting to peel at the corners. When you look at this example also, the relative pronoun which is mandatory use because without the using of this relative pronoun, we cannot make the sentence complete and meaningful. Okay guys, that's all in this video. And if you really like the content and the effort that we are putting into this channel, please like, share and subscribe our channel. Happy learning.